Poe's background. He was born on January 19th, 1809, and he died October 7th, 1849. He was one of three. When he was 2 years old, his mother died after a separation from his dad. His other siblings were taken in by other families, while Poe was taken in by the Allans. He dropped out of school because of debt, and he later formed a drinking problem. When Poe came back from the army, Miss Allan died, and later he left for New York City to become a writer. After unsuccessfully submitting writings to magazines and not having friends, Poe left and married his cousin Virginia, who was only 13 while he was 27. Still struggling to get a job, Virginia's health started to fail. She died in 1847, about 10 days after Poe's birthday. He later sold successful copies of his writings, but they weren't enough to keep him out of financial trouble. He was about to marry another girl, but sadly he died of unknown causes.
The Lake by Edgar Allan Poe.
In spring of youth it was my lot to haunt of the wide world a spot, the which I could not love the less, so lovely was the loneliness of a wild lake with the black rock bound, and the tall pines that towered around. But when the night had thrown her pall upon that spot as upon all, and mystic wind went by, the murmuring and melody, then I would wake to the terror of the lone lake. Yet that terror was not fright, but a tremulous delight, a feeling not the jeweled mind could teach or bribe me to define, nor love, although the love were thine. Death was in that poisonous wave, and in its gulf a fitting grave, for him who thence could solace bring to his lone lake imagining, whose solitary soul could make an Eden of that dim lake. The motif of this poem is change happens. Words highlighted in pink represent imagery. The lines that say, in the spring of youth, and of a wild lake with black rock bound, and the tall pines that towered around, they all show setting, and the setting is a secluded area that still manages to be full with nature. Mystic wind, murmuring in the melody, and to the terror of the lone lake, show that the setting is turning into a dark place, a mysterious, terrifying, no longer pleasant place. Terror was not fright, but a tremulous delight. Terror, meaning afraid, and fright, as in anticipation, shows that his fear was not his anticipation of the night, but it was a tremulous delight. Tremulous means quivering from weakness or fear. So he had a fearful delight of the night coming. Were, death was in that poisonous wave, for him who thence could solace bring. He describes death as the poisonous wave, meaning death could come over like a wave and just wash you away, and that death is very common, is always coming. Then, thence means as a result, and solace means to comfort. So he's saying that as a result, could comfort bring to his lone imagining, saying that even though death is common, you can still find comfort in life. Highlighted in green are for tone and mood. In the first couple lines, he mentions the words love and lovely. This shows a happy tone, cheerful, light, caring, happy words. Next, even though nothing is highlighted in green, you can still tell that the tone is changing. This stanza is becoming darker and more mysterious. Something is coming and it's slowly creeping in. The tone seems more fearful, and the change is very dramatic. These lines, he says, yet that terror was not fright, and also a feeling not the jeweled mind could teach or bribe me to define. Terror shows that he's fearful, and that he can't define the feeling he's having shows that he's puzzled and confused about what's happening right now. It says that death was a poisonous wave, and to his lone imagining, whose solitary soul could make an Eden of that dim lake. It says that death will always be there, and it has a special spot reserved for a person who could comfort the person who imagines these scary things. But that spot is reserved for a person who can only picture the dim lake into a blissful Eden. Words that are in orange, and also the last sentence of the poem, show symbolism. The line, "But when the night hath thrown her pall." Pall is a burial garment, and then night shows mystery, and everything comes out or changes when it becomes nighttime. Also, nighttime shows kind of like death or something scary creeping up on the beautiful lake. Also, the last line, "In Eden of that dim lake." Eden is a garden or delightful bliss. So the dim and dull lake at night was an Eden during the day. Full poem, Poe says that the lake is a mysterious thing, and coincidentally, so is his death. Into the motif, you can say that the whole poem says you need something to look past the bad things and see the good things. Change happens, and good things can be made out of the bad.
The Silence by Edgar Allan.
There are some qualities, some incorporate things that have a double life, which thus is made a type of twin entity which springs from matter and light, evidence in solid and shade. There is twofold silence, sea and shore, body and soul. One dwells in a lonely place, newly with grass o'ergrown, some solemn graces, some human memories in tearful lore. Render him terrorless, his name no more. He is the corporate silence, dread him not. No power hath he of evil in himself, but should thee some urgent fate ultimately lot, bring thee to meet his shadow, nameless elf, that haunteth the lone regions where hath trod no foot on of man, commend thyself to God. Looking into the author's background, this poem was written shortly after the death of Poe's wife. You can tell that this poem is about Poe grieving over his wife's death because of the gloomy tone, and from the theme, there are two sides to life. Looking at the tone and mood, which are highlighted in green, these words like tearful lore, which means sad tales, haunteth, which means haunted, and other words like terrorless, some urgent fate, evil, dread, lonely, and solemn, are some words that show depression, sadness, and despair in the tone and mood. The reason for this is because these words are usually associated with these feelings. Now looking at the imagery, which is highlighted in red, the first line highlighted in red in the poem says that from the matter and light, evidence in solid, in shade, which mentions matter which is dark and light which is bright, and it compares two contrasting opposites like life and death. Next line highlighted in red says newly with grass or grown, which makes you imagine a place that is either abandoned or unkept or uninhabited. This makes the scene seem ghostly. The next line highlighted in red says lone regions were half trod, which means in modern terms isolated places that were once walked upon, giving it a once again abandoned image. Highlighted in pink is symbolism. The first line highlighted in pink says there is a twofold silence, sea and shore, body and soul. When it says twofold, that means two-sided. So this line is looking at the two-sided silence. There is sea and shore, the loud sea and the quiet shore, and then there's body and soul, your outside body, which is making noise and is out there, and then your inner soul, which is the more silent part of you. And the shore is always calm, just like the soul. And the body is just like the sea. It is always moving, even though it seems calm and silent. And that is highlighted pink says, render him terrorless, his name's no more. In modern terms, this means that his image is fearless, and his name is not mentioned anymore. When the poem says his or he, it is referring to silence in the poem. Silence symbolizes death. When it says, render him terrorless, it's saying that death's image is fearless. When it says, his name's no more, it means when somebody's had enough, death has been called upon. The last line highlighted in pink says, bring thee to meet his shadow, nameless elf. When it says to bring thee to meet his shadow, it's saying that it's bringing the person to their death shadow. And when it says nameless elf, he is calling death a nameless creature with no worth. This relates to the Bible with the angel of death. The angel came up to all the houses. This is like the shadow, where the shadow follows you around wherever you go. So when Poe's talking about the death's shadow, he's talking about death overcoming the person with the shadow. It is always there, but you never know when it's going to come, much like the angel of death in the Bible. The last two lines say, "That haunteth the lone region where hath trod no foot of man, commend thyself to God." We infer that he is talking to his wife's spirit in this last two lines. He is saying that she can go rest in peace now because she is now in God's hands.
Poems connect because they're both talking about two sides to everything.
In Silence, he's talking about the two sides to life.
In The Lake, he's talking about the two sides of struggle.
Fun fact!
Poe was born a Capricorn, and some traits of Capricorns are that they can be negative, pessimistic, and suspicious. Coincidentally, this is the mood for a lot of his poems and stories.